The Fit Factor, there's no one like us. The only podcast you can truly trust.
Hello, and welcome back to Fig Factor Podcast, episode 10. I'm your host, Miles George, and we are here with two very special guests today. I'd love to introduce to you guys Dr. Madusha Peiris, a PhD in neuroscience from the University of Queensland, a research career in neurogastroenterology.
Perfect.
At the Queen Mary University in London. Author, speaker, and feature on Channel 4's How to Beat Fat as well. And also co-founder and CEO of Elcella, who we'll introduce to you very shortly. I'm also joined with Dr. Rubina Aktar as well, who is a PhD of enteric neuroscience at QMUL, studied biomedical sciences at Queen Mary University of London, recognised with varying awards for contributions to gut research, and also co-founder and COO of Elcella. I hope I got all that right.
Yep, perfect.
A lot of big words in there. I needed to write that all down.
You did a good job.
I did the job. So we're here to talk about gut health. We're here to talk about gut health, appetite suppressants, appetite control, and all things gut. Tell me a bit more about what you've studied and what you guys are doing.
So I have studied the gut for about 17 years, so a big chunk of my life. And so it has a very special place in my heart and my life because I think we take the gut for granted. And as a person who studied it for this long, I can tell you it's actually a very complicated system. And for over a decade, I've been interested in understanding how the gut interacts with the food we eat. I've been interested in how the gut functions in terms of how it pushes food along, how it makes sure that process happens smoothly. And I've also been really interested in understanding how gut pain works, because actually gut pain is a very common symptom experienced by a lot of people. So I've spent a lot of time in the lab doing lots of work, especially on human gut tissue. That's quite our speciality, actually. We want to really understand what happens in human beings. And oftentimes in science, we spend a lot of time working in animal models or working in very specific types of cells. And we don't really work very closely with humans until we get to that clinical trial stage, which is a very far stage down the track when it comes to scientific research. So we do things a bit differently. We actually start working quite early on with humans by looking at human gut tissue. And we have a very good relationship with our universities and the hospital right next to us. So I built a career working on human gut tissue, trying to understand all the different things that happen in the gut, from inflammation to pain to how food is actually recognized and sensed, all in one way or another related to human gut tissue. And then in the last, 7 years or so, we've actually translated our work into clinical trials and actually testing our discoveries in actual human beings with full guts to see that actually what we've really learned in the lab using this very cool way of studying science with human gut tissue does translate perfectly, unsurprisingly, to humans. And so my career has kind of spanned the breadth of being a very molecular scientist, looking down the microscope in the lab, all the way to being a person who is running clinical trials and leading kind of discoveries, ready to take them into the commercial space and ready to take treatments out to people. So that's how my journey started as a scientist early on, and where I am now as the founder and CEO of Elcella, which is we're excited to bring this product, and we'll talk about it more later. That's an appetite suppressant to market.
Yeah, fantastic. I think something that's you know, if you've watched the end of episode 9, I sort of touched on GLP-1s,
Right.
and you know how much of a press boom this is, and appetite suppressants are, and you know how much people want this, and this is you know, big reason why I wanted you guys to come here, because you've got such an exciting product that you know, really appears to do a lot in terms of appetite suppressant and sort of diet control, and it's all natural. So yeah, I'm
It is all
excited to talk
natural.
about that.
Yeah.
One of the most important things about our product is that it's natural, and that's something that's a USP for us, with also the scientific validation of, like Madusha says, spanning 17 years of her career. So I might jump in and talk a little bit about me. I'm essentially a mini version of Madusha, I like to say sometimes. But my love for science started very early on when I was a child. I was always wondering how things work, very curious, wanting to understand how things work, and also trying to find solutions.
Yeah.
So when I did biomedical sciences at Queen Mary, I was really interested in physiology in general. And the gut specifically interested me because the GI tract is essentially our communication or our connection to the outside world. That's the only part of the body that gets exposed to food that we eat, the environment that we're around. So I've been fascinated by the GI tract, and people don't really, they look at the gut as, you know, well, it's just a basic organ. I mean, cancer and the brain, that, you know, understanding brain cancer or lung cancer, and these things are much more interesting, or the heart. But for me, the gut, or those people just think it's a place where you eat and then poop comes out. There's a lot more to it than just that. So
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
my passion for understanding the GI tract has been fundamental in developing this consumer product, actually.
Yeah, I think it's so exciting, and I think it's something that, you know, I'm always very passionate to educate people on as well. So, you know, I always talk about, I try to have a really good relationship with food and my own gut, having been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis at 16. So I was pretty much very careless and reckless with it at that earlier part of my life, and I've had a much better relationship at the later end. And I haven't got the scientific knowledge. I've not done any research, but I've always sort of trial and error to get the best out of myself and work around these things, whether it be for, you know, a bowel disease, or just for better general health. But certainly, you know, being part of Supplement Factory here has been great for me on that journey and what we do. And I've certainly noticed that in the past, I think about 3 years or so, we're always trying to be, you know, at the leading edge as a company now in terms of what's out there to support brands with new innovative products in the food space in terms of nutraceuticals. And we do a show called VitaFoods, which happens every year. We'll be attending this year, but in that show, a lot of brands come and they sort of show off the new advances in nutraceuticals in terms of, you know, what has research shown we can do with the human body, and how can we hack and unlock new benefits. And that sort of 3-year point ago, there was a lot of products coming out that targeted the gut. You know, how can we have something natural go through the digestive system, target the gut, and unlock new benefits for the human body, and that seemed to just appear at that point for me, and I've seemed to notice that really boom and blossom and grow over the past few years now. Is that, you know, have you seen that, you know, where you are in this space? Has that been something that's really been prevalent in that time period, or has it been longer?
I think so. I think perhaps it's important to define what a nutraceutical is initially. So for the nutraceutical is a word that's been derived from nutrients and the word pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
So it's an amalgamation of those two words. So nutra and then the ceutical at the end. And essentially what it is just nutrients that you get from your food that has better beneficial than just basic nutrition.
Yeah.
So it's helping not treating, but supporting diseases to improve symptomology. And I think that's the really key thing about nutraceuticals. And I agree with you, Miles. It's been a huge boom, and people are very interested in incorporating nutraceuticals that have proven benefits into their lifestyles because of the huge benefits that they've seen. I'm sure you've seen it with colitis. There's lots of different foods that you're told to eat or not eat that will help you with your symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, in terms of these products that we've seen, there's products out there that were claiming, 50% more athletic performance or, from targeting something in the gut, or better memory retention just through targeting a food going into the gut. We have a brand here that we work with which uses a specific type of collagen called UC2, which again targeting specific cells in the gut to unlock sort of the healing of joints. So all of these are very, very powerful things that we're seeing now that are coming out. In terms of, talk to me a little bit about what your product does. I think we should get into that.
Absolutely.
I think that's quite exciting.
So at Elcella, what our product is designed to do is actually unlock cells in your gut. In fact, the name Elcella comes from the cell type called L cell. Okay. And actually it's a group of cells that are found in your gut, quite far down in your gut predominantly. And these are the cells that are storing and holding on within their little cellular structure these very powerful hormones that go from your gut once they're released from those cells all the way up to your brain to help people get that feeling of fullness. And so that idea that the feeling of fullness comes completely and only from your mind is actually incorrect.
Right.
And to be honest, we didn't really know this until the last 10 to 15 years when the science really taught us that's how it works.
Wow.
And what was exciting for us is that we were at that early stage in that space, but we were trying to understand, well, how do nutrients activate the cell, the L cells, and how do nutrients release the content of L cells, such as GLP-1, which is the hormone that is a synthetic. Yes,
yeah.
the big buzzword everyone knows about now. But not 10, 15 years ago, no one knew what that was. Even as scientists, we were only beginning to understand what GLP-1 was. But what's come out of all of that research and what Elcella has done is found a way to unlock these L cells, which hold these hormones, including GLP-1, but also another very powerful hormone called PYY, which is actually even better at reducing appetite than GLP-1.
Oh, really?
That's right. Wow. But there's no artificial version of PYY yet.
Right.
But we thought, why do we need to make an artificial version if we already have these hormones in our body, in our gut, or as we speak? And so what we were doing was just starting to understand, studying very much how these cells work, how nutrients interact with these cells. And during that process, we came across this really exciting discovery that actually these cells can really respond to certain types of nutrients better than others.
Yeah.
So they're better at being unlocked by certain nutrients than other nutrients. And we found this combination that has a very powerful effect on making the cell very excited. And once the cell is excited, it releases all its hormones.
Yeah.
And when it releases all the hormones, that's when they can travel up to the brain and work on the appetite control centers that are in your brain to help you to say, you know what, I'm feeling full. Amazing. It's not you. You're thinking that. It is actually your gut is sending the signal.
Yeah, amazing.
And so that was the unlocking that we actually discovered, and that is the nutrient combination that's within our capsules at Elcella.
Amazing. So, yeah, this is the first time I'm hearing about the PYY as well.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that, that's something that's more powerful than the GLP-1.
At helping people feel full, that's its only job.
Yeah.
Only job in life, PYY's only job
Yeah.
is to create that feeling of fullness, as far as we know as scientists right now.
Amazing.
GLP-1 does also create that feeling of fullness, but it also has another job, which is to regulate the release of insulin.
Yeah.
And insulin helps us manage how much blood glucose or glucose in our blood it is happening at any one time. So actually PYY lasts for a longer time in your body, whereas GLP-1, it gets broken down quite quickly. So naturally, it makes sense that PYY is a more powerful inhibitor. It lasts for a longer time. It has a longer effect on your hunger.
I'll tell you an interesting thing about PYY.
Yeah.
So there are people who undergo sort of gastric bypass or surgery.
Yeah.
They essentially have part of their bowel removed, and when they eat a meal, all the nutrients get down to that bottom part of that gut that we talk about, the colon.
Yeah.
And then people have done lots of studies, scientists have done lots of studies to measure the different hormones that are circulating, and they found that PYY is increased quite significantly compared to the other hormones. And patients who are undergoing this type of surgery, they change their food preferences, they eat a lot less. The surgery is very successful. It's one of the best ways to reduce your weight. And we think, based on the studies that are out there, that PYY is the main driver for that.
Wow. Okay.
So we in our studies have also shown that not only GLP-1 is increased, but also PYY is increased.
Yeah, amazing. So you've actually worked out the real reason why those surgeries have actually worked so well. But you're also saying that this PYY, there is currently no synthetic version of it.
So that's why we're so excited, Miles. Yeah. This is our only product in the whole world that can get you, first of all, to naturally release your gut health and improve your gut health, but the only one that can really have a big improvement on these really important hormones that are really, really powerful at helping you feel full. So we're extremely excited to be the only ones who are capable of doing this right now. And all done completely naturally. So all our ingredients, which Ruby will tell you about, are completely plant-derived natural ingredients.
Yeah, amazing. And this, obviously PYY may be something that's synthesized in the future. Is that probably where pharma goes in the future?
Potentially. They've been working hard for a long time to try and figure this out. But sometimes it's not very easy to make a synthetic version of a natural compound or a natural hormone.
Yeah.
But yes, I think a lot of pharmaceutical companies are working at a very fast pace to come up with other artificial hormones and other artificial versions of hormones that people can either take in capsules or, at the moment, primarily inject. But obviously there are lots of downsides with
obviously with the pharmaceutical route.
Yes.
So I mean, if it's there, and you're saying we can unlock this naturally,
yes,
does pharma need to? And
it's a really good question.
It is a good question.
Yeah.
Do they need to?
Well, we think what is really important is to get your body back on your side. And if you can do that without having a synthetic drug, if you can do that without people having to suffer from side effects, and if we can do that without not really knowing what the long-term effects are and really creating a dependency, if your body is depending on these artificial hormones rather than working better by releasing your own hormones, I'm not sure where we would prefer people to have better health, better gut health.
I think
Absolutely.
so. I think we say food is thy medicine, Hippocrates, a long time ago, a quote. But I think the most important thing is that we as scientists believe that everything is actually out there in our environment, in the planet. We have to just source it in the right way, do the right science, ask the right questions, and then you can find all the solutions out there. Pharmaceuticals are important in certain diseases, of course, but at the same time, I think for things like appetite control, we can definitely, with our work over a decade now, we have found a solution for that.
Yeah.
So in a natural way, and then we don't have all the unwanted side effects that come along with those types of treatments.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. And when you say that everything is out there for us to be able to give our body what we need, and when did you discover that?
Honestly, I think this has been maybe a philosophy I've always had in my whole life, that there's lots of things in there that I can take, that I can even consume, that makes me feel better and on a personal level. So when I have a bit of reflux, for example, and I feel like I've had a spicy meal, I take a little bit of milk just afterwards, and it helps me, or some yogurt, and it helps me calm down. So the calming benefits of lots of things that are out there, you can utilize. I think one of the other things that science has done lots of research on is like peppermint.
Yeah.
Peppermint is a natural source that really helps people with IBS. So the pain that they feel from IBS.
We published a
peppermint.
paper on it.
We did.
Did
Yeah,
you?
we did.
Yes,
we
yes,
did.
yes.
So, I mean, we won't get into the science, but one of the receptors are critical. Is again, I won't go into details, but it's really very important in managing IBS type symptoms. And peppermint is found everywhere. Peppermint's great. So lots of different health benefits, and not only just on a physiological. Tea tree is also helpful for your skin, for cuts, and things like that. So I definitely am a firm believer that we can actually source what's in our environment, in our planets, to help human health.
Yeah, there's so much out that even
So
I
much.
use as well.
But I have to be honest. I was not a firm believer.
Really not?
I was very much a hardcore scientist. I
Yeah.
need, and I still am. I need to see the data. I need to see the validation. I need to see evidence that the things that are nutrient based actually work in a certain way at a very scientific microscopic level,
Yeah.
and then they can actually be shown to have a pathway. And that's what we've done because I am a hardcore scientist. I'm going to hand on my heart and say, I unless I see the evidence, unless I see the data, you can't convince me. And so what we have done, and this is what is the ethos of Elcella, is we are fundamentally steeped in science, and we are scientists at the very heart of the company. And we wouldn't be talking about any product at any stage without knowing for certain that we have the evidence, the fundamental evidence, and we can talk about later, we have the published paper, but we also have patents. And now patents are granted. It's a very difficult process, but you have to show that it's very novel. Nobody else has done anything remotely like it, and only then can you actually be awarded a patent. And so we're very proud of the fact that our work is patent protected, our product is patent protected, because it's steeped in over a decade of science. You've had to convince people like me that the data is real, that it works this way. I can show you exactly how it works each step, and it's completely driven by that very scientific desire to see a very strong set of evidence and strong set of data, and then I can be sitting here convinced that yes, nutrients do really work, and this is how they work.
You didn't want to believe it; you had to prove it.
I had to prove it. I had to prove it. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So that process of understanding, well, how do nutrients actually interact with the gut? We took it for granted. We're like, they're just absorbed. Food's absorbed. What's a big deal? And actually, it's not just absorbed. It's tasted just like you taste on your tongue.
Yeah.
Your gut has to taste what's in your diet. And so when we say feed your gut, we really do now mean feed your gut, because your gut's saying, what are you feeding me today? Because I know what you're going to be feeding me. I'm going to taste it, and then I'm going to think about how I'm going to feel about it.
Yeah, it's like the second brain, isn't it?
It is
really?
the second brain.
Yeah.
It has about 900 million neurons. So that's a huge number of completely independent. Some of them are completely independent to the brain, and some of them are very connected to the brain.
What's so smart about this second brain is that even if you remove it, it still can function autonomously, even without the brain. That's how brilliant the second brain is.
Okay. So what does that mean? Give me some context. What does that actually look
So,
like?
for example, I'm a scientist in the laboratory, so I have worked with mouse tissue before. So when you take out a colon from a mouse, for example, which is the lower part of the gut that we love, and you put it into an organ bath and, give it the right temperature, make sure it's all happy, it will contract as it would do if it's in the body. Wow. And that's pretty amazing. And you can do the same thing with human gut tissue, where we collect from the hospital, where we can put it into a nice bath and we can see the contractions, real live contractions happening. And again, it's not even in the body. Yeah. And that's fascinating to me.
And we were the first people in the world to actually record real life activity of neurons from the gut. So our pedigree is, we are world leading because we do things the hard way. But you can take a piece of tissue, like Ruby said, out from a human being, and then we can still record the neuronal activity like a pulse if you will. And it happens for hours. It can really stay alive for quite a while. So it doesn't need the brain to do any of that work. It has its own little nerve. It's called the enteric nervous system.
Yeah.
And it's a very complicated system for quite a complicated organ. If
Yeah.
you can imagine all the things that happen in your gut, you're like, it's not that complicated. It is.
Is not just a tube.
So we've really got to feed it right.
You got to feed it right. You got to treat it right.
We've got to treat it right. Yeah, it's like, don't do drugs for your brain, don't do bad food for your gut.
Exactly.
As
That's a great analogy.
as a start, there's more aspects to it, of course.
Yeah.
But food is a very important part of it.
Yeah, amazing. And in terms of this, going back to there's food out there that can help us with anything. How much do you reckon is still left on the table that we haven't discovered?
Oh, so much. So much. I think
go
I was
ahead.
going to say that, frankly, we haven't studied food well enough.
Yeah.
And if you go to different countries, like if you go to South America, if you go to different parts of Asia, there are these wonderful foods, vegetables, fruits that are really not well studied. And I'm sure that they have, from ancient herbal medicine practices, we know that there is definitely certain types of roots and fruits and vegetable sources that have a very potent effect on improving health. We don't know yet scientifically, perhaps, the in-depth nature. Like, for example, to convince me, the hardcore scientist,
Yeah.
I need to see the data. But I think we are kind of we're a little. I think we're sleeping on something really, really powerful here, and that's nature. And we call it nature's technology. And what we're doing at Elcella is harnessing nature's technology.
Yeah.
And I think we're only at the very beginning of that.
We haven't even scratched the surface, definitely. I think we had a trip, a work academic trip to Brazil, and one of our colleagues was telling us that there is a fruit you can find in the Amazon rainforest that has 1,000 times more vitamin C than oranges.
Wow.
So and we have no idea about it. I mean, you don't have to keep taking so many oranges or
Yeah.
oranges every day, but this fruit had such a high quantity of vitamin C that we would take once a week and would be fine. These little things that we haven't discovered yet, we haven't even explored what's out there yet. So again, like Madusha said, we're just scratching the surface.
And why do you think that is? Why are we not exploring this? Why are we not pushing that area of science?
I think there's lots of different reasons. I think it's primarily down to just having enough funding to support these sorts of studies. A lot of these countries are not able to fund as well as perhaps in the US and the UK and Australia and those big hubs and Europe, of course,
Yeah.
where a lot of scientific research happens. So collaboration is really important, and there are schemes for that. But it comes down to funding, really. We need to spend more money on understanding, paying scientists and spending more money on equipment so we can actually understand how these things work.
And
Yeah.
very much, people are investing in pharmaceutical drugs and going down the pharma route, whereas not a lot of people are looking at the natural sort of holistic approach of trying to treat certain types of diseases with what's in our elements.
Yeah.
And I think that's another problem that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of big pharma there's going to be a lot more funding there. There's a lot more money
Exactly.
that can be made out of
Exactly.
research from a
Absolutely.
synthetic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, which is interesting, really. So there's probably a lot out there on the table that we're not realising. It's so exciting to discover. But, if you were, someone that's maybe, you're suffering from, I don't know, bloating or brain fog or lethargy, or you've got IBD or whatever it may be, how would you guys advise that people actually go and find something natural to help them? A food, a nutraceutical? What would you say? Because most people would go down the route of pharmaceutical. What can I get over the counter at Boots? That's the go-to. How do you sort of switch your mindset and try something that's more natural? Where do you go to look and research these things?
That's a really tricky one to answer because, and we'll try our best, but with the gut, there's lots of different symptoms.
Yeah.
And so each symptom can be caused by a slightly different cause. There may be slightly different issue that's, causing that overall symptom. But if we look at, for example, IBD, we've done quite a lot of work as well, and my colleagues have done work to understand how nutrients and how certain types of diets can be very useful for people with IBD. So that's inflammatory bowel disease. So how to reduce that inflammation. what's really interesting is that in children, it's often quite difficult to treat IBD in children with the traditional steroids, because steroids have quite a number of side effects, including stunting growth.
Yeah.
So the preference is to not use steroids. So oftentimes, my clinician colleagues who are treating pediatric patients for IBD use a treatment called modulin, which is essentially like a food replacement therapy. So it's like a drink that you can take, and it replaces all the meals for 4 full weeks. So what this does is it helps the gut kind of heal because it's just getting nutrients that it needs.
Yeah.
It's getting a break, if you will, but it really, really helps. It really works very, very well.
Okay.
Now,
Interesting.
could adults use this? Probably, but replacing a diet with a drink for 4 weeks, parents can probably push their kids to do it. It's probably a bit harder to push adults to stick to that potentially. But what it does show us is that having a nutrient-rich drink that replaces perhaps a combination of foods that could be irritating and causing inflammation has a very powerful effect on reducing inflammation. So you would think that when it comes to gut inflammation, that perhaps foods can be used to heal. And I think there is good evidence that is a possibility. It's just quite difficult because to instill and to enforce, because it's really hard to do with adults. And also there are, every single person who has IBD needs to talk to their clinician consultant as well to understand what is optimal for them as part of their treatment strategy. But yeah, we certainly do think food is a big part of being able to heal the gut.
Absolutely. And in terms of, when you talk about, going on to more steroid treatments and the pharmaceutical options, what is if you've got, a pharmaceutical option, why are there so many side effects that come with them? Scientifically, how does that happen compared to natural food?
So it's because it gets into your circulation and it doesn't just work on your gut. It starts to work in other places in your body. But also your gut is a place that causes a lot of symptoms if you don't treat it exactly how it should.
Yeah.
And so there's all drugs have some symptoms in some way or another because they're modulating a system that's probably a little bit too much or a little bit too wide, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So that's kind of the reason why drugs often cause symptoms.
So I put it in this context that if this is right, tell me. It's like turning one cog over here to slightly turn this one here, but all the other bits in the middle.
Correct.
Are out of whack.
That's a really
our bodies
good
are very
analogy.
interconnected.
Yeah.
And when you turn one wheel, like you say, the cog, the other one's kind of turning a little bit. And that's what happens when you're taking a medication to help any symptoms that you're feeling. You're fixing something. And often people say, well, I feel nauseous or I feel bloating associated with this. So you kind of have to, when clinicians prescribe something, you have to think about what's the most important thing that I want to treat here, even though I'm getting some side effects. And, it's important, for example, with inflammation, steroid therapy, you need the steroids to help you reduce inflammation, although you may get other side effects. But the primary thing is the most important thing that's causing you to feel unwell is the inflammation.
Yes.
So we have to target that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if we're saying in terms of, I know you mentioned your work with peppermint.
Yes.
On IBS. So that shouldn't have any side effects, should it, using peppermint to help with the symptoms of IBS?
No, it shouldn't. I don't think it would have any associated symptoms. But I think the important thing is to understand that we as people, we're not homogenous, we're very heterogeneous. Everyone's responses to different things are very different. And I say everyone has a unique signature, thing similar to what you were saying earlier about the fingerprint. We're all very different in every aspect, whether it's the type of foods that we respond to, is the type of therapy that we need to take. So our responses are always going to be a little bit different. So peppermint, for me, I think it's quite commonly known that there are no associated side effects with taking peppermint.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. And I know I did have some studies around that I've shared with you before, actually,
Yes.
on specific natural treatments for IBD, Crohn's, colitis. I'm going to get those up in a minute and talk through. I wanted to get your, feedback, especially as the hardcore scientist as well.
I'm still a hardcore scientist, but I'm a believer of naturally trying to
Yeah,
help the body.
Absolutely, but from those, are the papers good? Is the research good behind those? Is there any foundation for it, or in terms of digesting, I suppose the papers that have been written, is it correlation, or is it actually true science that those things actually work? In your opinion?
I actually think they're quite good. I actually think they are quite well organized studies that have been well planned out. And I think the second study, which showed essentially how it works, which is, so this herbal medicine actually is able to reduce the amount of inflammation in the body, was actually measured. And I think that's a very powerful outcome. So I do think there is quite a lot of valid data that is coming out of these journals. They wouldn't be published otherwise, to be honest.
But the initial scientific correlational studies that people think, it's just a correlation, but those are important. The correlation studies show that there's an association or there's a helpful benefit by taking this medicine or this herbal medicine.
Yeah.
It's like the paper that you're referring to. But what Madusha mentions is quite critical as well. The second paper that shows the mechanism of how that's working, that's really tells you that this is actually working via a pathway in your body, which gives it a lot more credibility.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a quick pause, and I'm just going to find some of these papers. We've located the papers. Thank you very much, Tom. So, interesting studies that I found here, we were just talking about. So, this is actually something that's been part of a personal journey for me with ulcerative colitis and trying to find, those natural remedies that I spoke to you guys about, to try and find, what's the best way. Because we all know with IBD or any other issue, the synthetics, the steroids, whatever it is, a long list of side effects. I'd always rather try a natural route first, and I'd advocate anyone to. And there's some amazing things here that really blew my mind, in terms of the studies. I think you can find articles out there on the web that will say, something like aloe vera is helpful for reducing inflammation or helping, heal gut lining. And you go, okay, that's good, I might throw it in there. But then you come across a study and you read it, and I think we've got here that aloe vera, 100 ml twice a day, randomised, double-blind, controlled study. Aloe vera produces significantly better clinical response than in those receiving placebo. The simple clinical colitis activity index and histological scores decreased significantly during treatment with aloe vera, but not with placebo. So, in terms of managing the actual factors of the disease, it's been pretty significant in being able to do that, and they've tested that compared to a placebo. There's quite a few on here as well. I'm gonna butcher this word. Artemisia absinthium, which is also known as wormwood. So something I've actually talked about a lot as well is. I normally keep my colitis under control and pretty manageable in a state of remission, for the last probably 10 years or so.
Oh, amazing.
But the best relationship I've had with it was actually uncovering the wormwood herb, taking that based on a study I read. And those past 3 years of me taking that, I basically have told people I don't really have colitis anymore. Now, obviously, scientifically, there's probably still something happening there, but I just don't notice any side effects.
You're keeping it under control.
It's well under control.
Yeah.
It's not even something I'd ever think about, really.
Yeah.
So that was amazing, to read that study, to actually see that there was some science behind how the effect that it had. Taking it every day very religiously, and being able to do more things than I'd even been able to do before. I'd always known doing intolerance tests that I have issues with dairy. That obviously there are, if you've got IBD, then you shouldn't be having things that harm gut bacteria, such as artificial colourings, flavourings, sweeteners, and emulsifiers. But there has been periods in this 3 years where as you do, you go through different stages of life, and more dairy's going in. We're on a holiday. We eat what we want for 2
super
weeks.
hard to be so restrictive, isn't
absolutely.
it? Yeah,
You've got to live
you
life.
yeah.
And I've been able to have that relationship with food and do those things in moderation or semi-moderation, but not have any consequences or issues, which I've just found to be pretty amazing. So I think actually we will link the studies in the footer of the podcast, so people can read them if you're interested, and you'll actually be able to see. I think at the end of one of them, they recommended that there would be no reason to take azathioprine or steroids.
I read that, yes, which is such an amazing thing. And I think one of the studies which showed how this particular herb worked was to reduce the amount of a cytokine, which is essentially a chemical messenger that is quite powerful at making an inflammatory environment. It perpetuates inflammation. So it's kind of a bad guy when it comes to IBD, and it's called TNF alpha. And in fact, there are drug therapies that neutralize TNF alpha. They're called biologicals. And they're often, reserved for people with quite severe IBD. And what this herb seems to do, or can do, is it can actually reduce the amount of TNF alpha in patients with IBD, with Crohn's disease, who are treated with this herb compared to people who were on the placebo. For me, that was a very powerful piece of evidence. As you can, as I said earlier, I need to see the evidence. And I think that is a very powerful piece of evidence, which shows how this herb is actually working to have an anti-inflammatory effect or keep your inflammation at bay, which is helping people with IBD keep their symptoms down and, like yourself, have a healthier life.
Yeah, absolutely. It was game changing for me, really, in terms of, the period where I started to take that. I actually had like a mild flare up, really. And again, this period before taking the wormwood and some other bits on this list as well, the relationship with it was good. It was mostly in remission for that sort of, those 7 years prior, or whatever it was. But there'd be periods where you don't quite, you lose track of your diet, and then it starts to come back, and you're always battling against that. You're trying to keep on top of that. So I actually was about to have the discussion about the biologicals, and they were trying to get it under control. They're saying, we've put you on steroids before, we've done this with you before. We don't want to keep continuing that cycle of treatment, so we're going to look at these. And I said, this comes with more side effects and more problems, and I don't want that. And I just thought, right, give me 4 weeks.
Let me try and heal myself.
I want to try and heal myself. Oh, and you cannot believe the response I get from the doctors on that. Not positive, very reckless. It was considered to be very reckless. And it just did it.
Just did it anyway.
It just did it. It just got rid of it, and it quashed it for 3 years. So that was...
So you know what? It shows that actually we are still learning, doctors. We're still learning, and it's the science and the research that drives all of our knowledge. And so it's not that we don't want people to use natural nutraceutical to help their health. It's just that we're only really beginning to understand properly, and like the type of work that we've done at Elcella, to provide a really strong scientific and clinical data set to show it does work, here's how it works, and we're confident that we've done the clinical trials to really validate it. So if we're able to, and that's a key problem, is there's not enough clinical studies, there's not enough studies in general at scientific, very high scientific level done on these herbal medicines in order to really show how they work, and the mechanism for their efficacy. And then once we have that sort of data, that's when we can the perception not just of patients such as yourself who really do want to find alternative treatments, but also to the medical community who honestly, they want patients to have the best health. It's just that it's ingrained in us that is going to be through clinically validated and studied drugs and medicines.
I think it works. It works. We know it. It's proven. It's got all the studies. It's had all the funding.
Yes.
So I'm not surprised that, when you present to a doctor or a specialist with an issue, that's going to be the first line of care, obviously. And I probably maybe wouldn't fully advocate don't do what the doctor advises
No,
and
not
take
at all.
something natural, but maybe try both at the
Yeah,
same time.
I think it's always important to let your consultant and your medical team guide you as to what is best. But it's always very important to have a conversation with them to say, this is what I want to try as well. And it's not, will it hurt? Will it harm? Will it interact with some of the medications I'm taking? Because that can also happen. So it's always good to have a conversation.
Yeah,
But I
absolutely.
also think it's very important to take the lead on your own health because nobody knows your body as well as you do.
And
No,
really follow
absolutely.
your gut instinct, and if people think, my gut instinct, is this right? Am I just going to follow what doctors tell me? I think it is important to listen to your doctor and whatever they prescribe, it's appropriate for you because they've thought about you. But I think it's also important to remember your gut instincts. If it's telling you, maybe I can try something else. And as long as that doesn't interfere with anything else that you're taking, I think you should go ahead and do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, how do you think we should listen to our gut? This second brain that we have. How should we listen to it to understand whether we're giving it what it needs or not? What are the signs?
It's difficult to answer that question, I think. I think what you said, Miles, earlier about trialing different things. You trial different types of foods, and then you can see what symptoms you gain from them. If you get really bad symptoms, then I would say avoid those types of foods, for example. Even with medication, some people respond really poorly, and others respond really well. So it depends on the level or how much you can tolerate, whether it's a medication or whether it's something natural. I think it's all individual, so you have to listen to yourself in that way, I think, and trial and error a little bit with yourself, as long as you're not causing any detriment to yourself, but trial and error.
And what is a bad symptom of something you've eaten? What is a sign that your body doesn't agree with that?
Sometimes people really struggle with bloating, and sometimes it causes. So bloating is when essentially it feels like your tummy is expanding and actually your abdomen is expanding, and sometimes people find that very uncomfortable, and that can also lead to kind of that feeling of cramping pain.
Yeah.
So that's sometimes I think. A problem when it comes to certain types of foods. I felt that there are certain types of foods that I eat that I avoid now, which give me really bad. I feel bloating and it hurts. It just it doesn't feel very comfortable. So bloating's a big one.
Pain is another one. Sometimes you get that wincing pain, and it's not there all the time. You might just come and go. It might be sometimes and sometimes not, depending on what food you eat. So I think just general, it's called visceral pain.
Yeah.
So the pain you feel around your GI tract, that's really sometimes quite one of the common side effects people feel from different types of medications and also foods.
What about gas? Is that a common sign that your
That's
stomach's
part of
upset?
bloating.
That's all
That's
part
part
of
of
the whole
bloating.
thing, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when we say bloating. So, it's a medical term, but essentially that means gas. So that buildup of gas is sometimes quite painful, and it is a common. It's a common feature of certain, and sometimes you're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to have a high fiber diet. You're trying to really eat well, and you're like, how come I'm bloated now? But in many ways, it's because of your gut bacteria. So your gut bacteria, they love to chomp on fiber. That's their food.
Yeah.
But as a result of the gut bacteria chomping on this food, they produce essentially waste. And their waste is gas.
Yeah.
And so when you're bloated, it's related to your gut bacteria producing quite a lot of gas as a result of their own waste products. But in some ways, I also feel that, if they're happy and they're producing a bit of gas, it can be uncomfortable, but it does abate. It does go away. And often a great way to deal with bloating is to do a little bit of exercise. Go for a walk. Post-meal, go for a walk. It's a very healthy thing to do, actually, to not just sit, especially after a big meal, to not just sit there is a very good thing to go for a walk, drink lots of water, and get your body kind of pumping with energy.
Yeah.
It helps. It really does help.
Yeah, no one's saying go to the gym straight after.
Yeah.
Just a short walk, something
Yeah.
that's manageable, something that you can incorporate. Just go for a block around your house, and that's enough. And that really does help. I know I found that when I've had a meal that I know this is not the best meal to eat, and I know it's going to cause me a little bit of bloating, but I take a walk afterwards, and I don't get those symptoms. times.
Very good.
So you can enjoy some
Yeah.
types of foods without worrying too much.
So eat whatever you want, just walk after.
Well, not quite, not quite.
Yes,
But
I did say that.
When it comes to a healthy gut, I think we've talked about this many times. Is there's not a silver bullet. There's not one single thing that you should be doing and only doing. You have to have a great diet. You have to feed your bacteria. You just got to.
They're hungry.
They're waiting to be fed, but also you do need to have a good amount of exercise. You do need to drink lots of water. I always say this to people because the process of digestion is a very water-heavy process. It requires a lot of water to help break down the food we eat.
Yeah.
So having lots of water in your day-to-day life is quite important.
How much should we be having?
There's no real sort of set limit. I mean, I think people say between 1.5 to 2 liters of water, but I always say that after a meal you should have 1 or 2 glasses of water to really help your digestive system
I'm
digest.
really bad at this.
Yeah, sometimes we're not very good at doing that. It's
I try
quite
to
a
be good at
simple
the food,
thing.
and I forget the water.
Yeah,
I
No,
seem to be
you gotta
like,
have you gotta have
especially
the
during the
water.
colder months, I just don't want to drink so much as much as in the warmer months. So yeah, I need to get better at that too.
Yeah. I suppose I try to just keep away from drinks that flavoured drinks and these
Yeah.
sorts of things and squash.
It's a good
and
idea.
Whatever it is, I always try to do that. But then water's just water, so it's a bit boring. So so just don't drink enough, probably. But one thing we've actually done, we asked some of our viewers and the audience, so we knew we were going to have gut experts on this week, so we got some myth-busting Q&As that I wanted to go through with you guys. I think this will be really insightful. So this is what reminded me, you just touched on it. So a common one that we hear, exercise has no impact on gut health.
Completely untrue.
Okay.
Exercise is one of the key factors that has an impact on gut health, and we've just touched on that earlier, like you said. Gut health is not just about healthy cells, healthy gut. It's also the symptoms that are associated with gut health. So, like if you take something and it's causing you bloating, for example, doing some exercise definitely helps. And I always think if you're strengthening and doing some exercise that's a little bit more cardio related, a little bit more heavier, it's also helpful to strengthen the muscles around your gut.
Yeah.
And that's also helpful. So I think exercise is definitely, I don't do enough of it, I need to do more, but exercise is definitely helpful for gut health.
There you go, busted.
Yes,
On that
Dan.
one.
Next.
More fibre is always better for your gut.
I think it's not about quantities. It's about getting the right type of fiber and also to have a diverse group of vegetables and sources of fiber that can really, really help your gut by basically feeding your gut bacteria. And the thing is, we have different types of gut bacteria, so we can't just give it one type of fiber and just go nuts on it. That's not going to be helpful.
Okay, that doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Because I hear artichoke is really good.
So you
can't
can't
take
just
it
go
very
to
well.
it is. It's very fibrous,
Yeah.
certain parts of it. So it's really important to have a variety of fiber in your diet.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to remember that it's not just what, when you say gut bacteria, it doesn't just encompass one. You've got hundreds of different types of bacteria in there, and they all like something different. They're hard to keep happy. They're hard to keep happy, but
like everyone's different. Like you're
everyone's
saying.
slightly different as well. So variety is the key.
Yeah. So mixture of soluble, insoluble fibres.
Exactly.
Not one or the other.
Yeah.
The more variety you give, the happier you get bacteria and the happier you'll be. That's the bottom answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, busted. You should poo once a day.
We are enteric neuroscientists. We understand this field very well. You don't have to poop once a day. That's not, if you don't do that, doesn't mean you're unhealthy at all. Constipation, which is if you're not pooping, it has to be at least 3 or more days that you haven't gone to the toilet. And so if it's more than 3 days, then I would say seek some professional advice with your GP and then your doctor. But if you don't poo every day, that doesn't mean you're unhealthy at all. You're fine.
So how much is too much then on the other end of the spectrum?
It depends. There's lots of different factors that are important. So, but also about consistency. And I know it's getting a little bit gross.
Gross.
Disgusting.
It depends how you are. So if you're having a lot of diarrhea, for example, and you're going a couple of times a day, that's not healthy. There's something not right there. But if you're going twice a day even, that's also very healthy.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that there's a problem.
Yeah, I think that's a common question. You know, I'm very comfortable with talking about the gut because of my relationship with food and my own gut. So I have this conversation with people all the time, and I hear a wide range of answers. I hear all sorts of things. I hear twice a week. I hear 5 times a day from people who say, "Oh, I'm healthy, I'm fine." So yeah, it's a wide range, isn't it? So I suppose it's all just related to our diet and our gut individually, isn't it? So okay, probiotics solve all gut health issues.
I wish it was that simple. I wish it was really that simple. Probiotics, essentially, so probiotics are live gut bacteria that you can take as a capsule, sometimes in a drink, etc. It doesn't solve everything. I think, like we said, everything is about balance. You have to have also prebiotics, which are the food for your gut bacteria, say fiber, fermented foods, kefir, to name a few. And also you have to have a good diet. Yeah. So it can't just be focused on, I'm having probiotics, but I'm having a terrible diet. It doesn't matter. It does matter.
It's not a plaster.
No, it doesn't work that way. It's a complicated system, and we have to think about it that way.
Yeah, there's very common strains as well. I know that are used in things like yogurts.
Yes.
And, in supermarket foods, and but I don't personally believe they always work with the desired effects on everybody.
And I think one of the key issues that still exist is that you need to get the bacteria down to quite the last part of your gut towards the end. And the way that if you're drinking it in yogurt, or if you're taking a capsule that's not specially made to go all the way down, which I don't think any probiotics really are right now,
I think
it makes it quite difficult to actually have an effect that can be truly, scientifically validated.
It is tough, actually. So, we're currently sitting in a registered probiotic manufacturing facility as well. So, we handle and we produce them here. And when we talk about, making gut products with clients, we tend to actually advise down the route of prebiotic. Go for a prebiotic first.
I feel the same way.
Feed the fingerprint.
Yes. I very much do that.
Bacteria.
Yes.
And then probiotics second, and also because probiotics, I won't get too much into this, but it's very difficult to keep them alive. It's very difficult to get them into the gut.
It is.
So they become very expensive projects. But I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with probiotics as products.
And also the landscape for probiotics is changing. We're learning more and more about it. Again, as scientists, I can tell you that we're really understanding how they work. For a long time, we've known they're good, but we don't know why or how or the nitty-gritty details. And, I love nitty-gritty details. And we've done some work to show what's really interesting is that certain types of bacteria, the type of bacteria that we have, all of us have very commonly, it's so important for your gut nervous system that if you take it away, your gut nervous system changes. You put it back in, it goes back to how it should be. So it's your body's very responsive to your gut bacteria. So it's about the right balance and getting the right balance for you as an individual. So that kind of probiotic approach, I think, also has to come from a bit more of an individual style treatment strategy.
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. And does spicy food cause ulcers?
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. I think people worry, oh my God, it's so spicy, it's burning in my mouth. Is it going to cause me?
I heard it was quite good for the gut, spicy food.
My theory is that spicy foods are very good for metabolism. I feel that eating a lot, it makes you hot, it makes you sweaty, it makes your body start going.
Yeah.
So, that myth is completely busted. It does not cause ulcers.
There we go. Good.
Actually, it's a bacteria that causes stomach ulcers.
That's right.
And that was discovered quite a while ago now, that it's down to a particular type of bacteria, and it's very easy to treat with an antibiotic.
Interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting. Detoxes, are they good for you?
So
can
I
take that
think
one.
detox is essentially something you can do when you want to get healthy again. And I don't think you should, that doesn't mean removing everything. I think that should mean, you know what, I'm going to take a break from giving my gut a hard time by eating things that I probably shouldn't be eating, that are highly processed, that are highly fatty, fast food, that sort of thing. And I think we should consider a detox as when you say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to take a break from these things that are not good, and I'm going to focus on things that are good for me. And that is going to be fresh fruit and vegetable, home-cooked meals. Underrated, I tell you. Drinking lots of water.
Yep, gotta remember that one.
Yeah. And, maybe doing some exercise. I think that's what we should call a detox, is saying, you know what, I'm not going to do all of these things that are bad. I'm going to start doing things that are good. And this is what I'm going to call a detox.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And something I was going to talk about was this autoimmune protocol diet that I've recently trialled with. I'm like my own gut guinea pig, basically. But for those who don't know, the autoimmune protocol diet, it's... I don't actually know who invented it, but it's a process of eliminating any food which could have evidence of being inflammatory in the body, which is quite restrictive. So I'll try and remember off the top of my head. We're talking about white potatoes, oats and grains and seeds, any nuts, any seed oils. We're talking about wheat, dairy as well, nightshades as well, quite a lot is being cut out of the diet. So I've done that over 30 days recently as a trial, which is, I suppose, a form of detox. And that process, I felt very good on that. So there's definitely foods that I've cut out that obviously don't agree with me. So I felt very good on it. And then the idea is that you reintroduce foods back in stages of how potentially inflammatory they may be to humans in general. And then you measure the results and see whether you keep it or whether you exclude it going forward. I actually found that adding things back in that I thought would be very tolerable for me, that I've never had a bad relationship with, actually caused quite distinct stomach upset. So that things like white potato and things like rapeseed oil that I'm noticing, in certain products. Is that, are these detoxes, is it changing the microbiome to sort of forget to handle these foods that you were previously good with? Is that what's causing something like that?
So I think the short answer is we don't know. We just don't know. But certainly there is evidence to show that that tasting of food by your gut, which we talked about, which is what Elcella is really pushing and kind of harnessing, that can also extend to your immune cells that can can drive inflammation, to also taste essentially what's in your diet. And some components of diet may actually trigger those cells to become hyperactive and become, kind of send that signal of we've got a problem here. It's inflammation time. And we're starting to see that more and more in terms of the scientific evidence. So there is an association with what you eat and how that can act as, if you will, an allergen, which just means it's something that your immune system sees as a problem. It's like, this is danger, I don't like it. And it starts to get hyperactive. So that is definitely an area of science that is evolving.
Is that sort of overconsumption of something?
Not necessarily. It could be that some people are just, their particular cells are simply more responsive or hyper-responsive to certain types of foods or certain nutrient families. But that's really a very interesting area that science is still developing. But I think it's very important because it's not just in cases of inflammatory bowel disease, but also in irritable bowel syndrome or IBS.
Yeah.
This is when people feel symptoms of bloating, or they have constipation or diarrhea, and mostly they have gut pain. Treatment with different types of diets where they eliminate certain types of foods. One of them is called the FODMAP diet, which is quite famous. Seems to really alleviate symptoms. The only problem that I have with that diet is, yes, I know it seems to work, but how? That's what I really want to know.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know how, at the very molecular microscopic level, it's actually having an effect on sort of reducing the inflammation or reducing any symptoms that are associated with foods. And I am so excited for the science to catch up with what we've observed as being
I think it's really hard to ask that question, why is it happening? Again, because we're so different.
Yeah.
Every single person is so different. So what might be working really well for you, Miles, might not be working very well for someone else. And your response to white potatoes is quite bad. Whereas someone else might be like, you know what, I'm fine on these. So I think it's interesting, this type of diet where you eliminate basically all things that cause inflammation and then slowly introduce them one by one. I think it's quite smart. So then you know personally what works for you best and what doesn't work for you best.
Yeah, obviously I've learnt some things. I don't want to cut out white potatoes.
Chips.
Yeah, no. I've had too many sweet potatoes on this diet for the last month. Yeah, it's interesting to understand and actually know how the body's responding to these things. And it always, fills me with these questions. So I think it comes down to the fact that I think we just don't know why, because everyone's different.
Everyone's different, and we just need the science to catch up.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to take another quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Let's talk about your exciting products. I think we've been through a lot of how can we heal the gut? How does the gut work? We've talked a bit about IBD, inflammation, but your products, it's not about IBD inflammation, it's about appetite, and this is a great follow-on from what we were doing on our last podcast about diet, and control over eating. Let's get into it. What are we really doing here to suppress appetite, and how well does this actually work?
So let me tell you about the science behind it, and then Ruby can tell you a bit more about the product and how it actually works. So I think we started off by saying that gut hormones, which obviously come from your gut, are very powerful at regulating appetite. And I think we've only started to understand that in the last 10 or so years. And during that time, I was doing science, really trying to understand how cells in your gut interact with the food you eat. And through that process of scientific learning on human gut tissue, came upon this very exciting discovery where we had what we call the eureka moment, where we realized that a combination of nutrients can really excite your gut. And that excitement of your gut helps it to work better. And in part of that working better scenario is to get gut hormones to come out of your gut to actually go to your brain to help you feel full. Now, what happens in obesity and when people become overweight is that these gut hormones just don't get released by the cells very well. And the sad part is that even after people lose weight, after being obese or having a certain amount of weight, their gut hormones just never go back to the way they were when you compare them to a lean person. So that's a real tragedy. So we thought, okay, well, we've got this fantastic way of getting your gut to be healthy again and really helping you boost those signals that help you to feel full by the gut hormones that are in this lower part of your gut. And so once we had that eureka moment in the lab, we thought to ourselves, hang on a tick, we've got a potentially new, completely natural way of getting your gut back on your side.
Was that like a real movie eureka moment?
It really was.
Madusha was running up and down the lab saying, oh my
I was
goodness.
completely shocked because I did not expect at all to see the results that were coming out. I just asked it what I thought was a very simple question. If you put nutrient A and nutrient B together, what happens to the gut? Does it get excited? Does it mean more hormones are coming out of your gut? And the answer was yes, and not just a yes, it was an astounding, it was a hell yeah.
That must have been incredible as a scientist.
Yeah.
That's what you strive for, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you, as a scientist, lots of experiments don't go the way you want.
Yeah.
You keep on trying, just every day you keep trying, and it's really about persistence. So when you have these eureka moments, really shout about it to really encourage other scientists, but also to say, you know what, here's this fantastic discovery that we've made. And so that was that eureka moment. And then when Ruby really joined the team, we had our hallelujah moment. So maybe I'll let Ruby tell you what the hallelujah moment was.
Yeah, I mean, eureka moments, lots of scientists say, oh, I've had a great idea, which is fantastic. And sometimes those great ideas are great, and sometimes they're not so great. But with this great idea, we actually wanted to then validate this in actual living, breathing, walking, talking people.
Yeah.
And that's when the clinical trials aspect comes to it. And then this hallelujah moment that Madusha talks about is when we actually tested our combination or our theory in people. So what we did is we collaborated and produced capsules that are very much specially coated. So they don't, when you ingest them, they don't break down in your stomach. They go all the way down to that last part of your gut, the colon, which is abundant with these L cells that we love, containing those gut hormones that make you feel full.
These are the excitable cells.
These are the
right?
excitable cells, exactly.
Yeah.
So we packed our nutrient combination, and then we put them in these capsules, and then these traveled all the way down your gut into that colon area, and basically giving your L cells, those excitable cells, a present. Here you go. These are the nutrients we know you love. So take these nutrients, and then they got excited and released whatever was inside of them.
That's why we call it unlocking.
Yeah, so that's how we had the right keys to unlock the cells in the right way.
And if you have it without the capsule, without the special coating, it's just not going to get there, right?
It's not effective. So lots of people say, well, why can't I just take some of these ingredients? And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It has to be packaged in a very sophisticated way. And then the hallelujah moment came when we actually gave these capsules to people, and they felt two things. They
They were also obese.
Oh, yes, they were definitely, yes, one of the important things, they were obese. So let's talk about the study a little bit, because there were two groups. We had obese, overweight volunteers, and we gave them either the actual capsules with the real ingredients, and then another dummy capsule which didn't have any of the right ingredients. And we measured, this is called, in scientific terminology, it's called a placebo. So these randomized double-blind placebo-controlled studies that you talked about earlier. And what we did is we gave them our capsules, and we measured two major outcomes. We wanted to measure how full they felt, essentially their appetite, and also whether those hormones that we know are very good at making you feel full, did they change? And we measured that in their blood over time. And we found two very interesting things. We found that, yes, their appetite was reduced, and the hormones, GLP-1, and one of our favorite other hormones, PYY, was elevated when they were taking our capsules compared to the placebo. And again, that moment blew our minds too. And I'm running up and down saying, oh my God, it's actually working. And we've tested this not only once, but 3 times over, where we've tested it in a dose-dependent way to see if different doses have an effect, and we did see an effect. So we've done this 3 times over, and based on that, I'll hand it back to Madusha. That's when Elcella was born.
Absolutely. So I think all of our explanations reflect our preclinical work, our clinical work, and our significant pedigree in science, which is really, really important, I think, to understand that it's not just we just randomly chose some nutrients and then just chose this system to deliver. It's all based on very core scientific evidence, which is not what we set out to do. We didn't set out to, create a product. We only set out to understand how the gut works and how we can understand how nutrients affect gut health. That was the only question we ever asked. And so I think some of the best discoveries in science are accidental. And this is exactly a great example of an accidental discovery that had the potential to become a product. And that's what we did. We went from the lab to testing to finally having this product that we have at Elcella that is revolutionary in how it works, and it looks at appetite control and appetite management in a completely different way, which is to get your gut cells to get excited about what you eat. And there's no other way that, honestly, it can work as effectively, we think, than doing it naturally.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's natural.
Exactly.
No side effects.
We haven't seen any side
Nope,
effects.
none
No.
at all.
No, same as eating food.
Same
So,
as they're all food ingredients.
yeah, all food ingredients. It's going to suppress your appetite. It's going to help you with weight management.
Exactly.
That's pretty big.
Yeah,
That's pretty huge.
we think it's phenomenal, and obviously you go like, well, obviously you guys would say that, but there's simply no other product, no other approach on the market or even in development that's looking at the appetite suppressing pathway like we are.
Yeah, it's amazing. And at Supplement Factory, we love this. This is why I wanted to come on here and share the story because, you know, I'm passionate about it and the company's passionate about sort of pushing nutraceuticals forward.
Yes.
And I'm like a broken record on this. How can we keep finding ways to push the natural foods of the earth, you know, to help our bodies? And I think you guys are a great example of this for something that people are so keen for, you know, in suppressing appetite and weight management.
The beauty of us, the difference with Elcella is that, yes, we are natural. And sometimes often people think, oh, it's a natural supplement. There's not much science behind it. But we have tested our product in a way that a pharmaceutical company would trust their drugs. So we've got that level of credibility and scientific rigor behind Elcella. So we're not just two people who've just come together in a garage in the back shed and saying, you know, let's put these together and see, hopefully it works. We've done over a decade of research on this, and we're so excited to have Elcella go into consumers' hands.
When is it available, guys?
So it's going to be available in April. So we're really in the process of working very hard with our manufacturers to get this very high-end optimal product to everybody who's signed up so far. We've had over 8,000 people on our wait list. And that's just in a couple of months, including yourself. And, you know, we really hope that it's going to revolutionize how we associate ourselves with food, how we look at ourselves, how we manage this issue of weight, which is such an important thing that we all have to have a healthy weight our entire life.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of work. You know, we can't just kind of let it be. And so what we're hoping to do at Elcella is to completely revolutionize the way we approach gut health and therefore weight management using a completely natural, validated, scientifically driven system.
Fantastic. That's amazing. So April for the release, available UK for now.
So we're going to be selling our product through our website, elcella.com. Everybody who's interested, please go and visit elcella.com right now to sign up. So you're going to be first on the list to know when the product is going to go on sale. You can visit us at our Instagram account and our Facebook account and our LinkedIn if you're really interested as well. Because we're really, really excited to put our product on the market and we know it's going to be a hit. So please, if you're interested, come and sign up so you're on the wait list and you'll be the first to know about it.
It sounds very exciting. We'll link all of the links to Elcella and where you can get it on the podcast and in the description as well. All of our links, social medias for both of you guys, and any references to studies as well will also be put in the description. Guys, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. It's been really eye-opening
Thank you
for
so
me.
much.
We hope to have you back on in the future as well to share the success story. And that'll be it from us. That was Fig Factor Podcast 10.
The Fig Factor, there's no one like us. The only podcast you can truly trust.